who will talk about the future of innovation. John Gage served as chief researcher and vice president of the Science Office for Sun Microsystems until June of last year. He is now with Kleiner Perkins as a partner, and among other areas, he is focused on the important issue of climate change. We are very honored to have you here. Welcome, John Gage.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Anne. I have a few things I want to show you. I'll talk very briefly, but I'd like to continue Anne's theme about power in the palm of your hand. And you mentioned in particular these devices used around the world, 280 million of them in Africa, not only for the normal things of humans talking to humans, but for this deeper issue of making sense of the world, because these allow you to send data. So why are you all here? It's because you know something many other people don't know. You know this event is happening here. You found out about it by email or a website. Someone might have texted you a message. Hundreds of millions of other people don't know what you know. They're not here. Your job is to take what you learn here to them. And the tools you'll use aren't the tools of 50 years ago. They're these tools. They're the tools of communicating with 280 million people, any one of whom in Africa I could call at this moment with this device. Those words could not have been said 5 years ago. 500 million people in China I could call at this moment from here. And since I'm on the net, I could use Skype and talk to them for free and not pay the phone company. So something's changed big time. And part of it's just the things we computer people did. We took chips, made them small, made devices to store energy, made them smaller and smaller. And suddenly we have billions and billions of devices. So let me show you. It's not a cell phone. This is a book. Here's the book. This little thing is made by Amazon. Doesn't use much energy because when the image arrives on the screen, it just flips little black and white ping pong balls so the image stays with no energy being used to keep it there. This thing's on the net. Actually, I have about 500 books on this. I have the basic manuals of chemical engineering. I have a lot of African agricultural documents. I have physics texts. I have chemistry texts. There are, well, I'll say 1 million free books ready to go here. So this device, well, maybe it's the same as this, keyboard, screen, display. We're going to see an explosion of these things. Let me show you something that was yesterday. Now, if you can see the screen, this is the New York Times. And there's Jeff Bezos. He's the person that started Amazon. And yesterday, he stood up and announced the new one. Better than this. Hold 1,000 books. No problem. So the headline you see there, Amazon gives Web4Dev 100,000 new Kindle models at $10 each. Now that's a lie. The trick to this is you take a web browser that can edit anything you look at, you change it so the headline's the way you would like the headline to read, and suddenly, whoa, we lost, how did we lose our signal? We just lost Jeff. So suddenly, you're able to alter the news. Let's see, on the technical front, the computer's okay. The plug-in is okay. Somebody kicked the cable out back there somewhere. Are we back? Nope. Okay, well, all right, then I'm not going to be able to show you anything else unless the screen comes back. So my point about this is that in the next few years, these devices are going to be dropping in cost. Will they be $10 each? Well, I predict that in about, let's say, 3 years, not 10, they will be at that price point. Why? In the world of technology, some brand new things have happened. One's quite technical, but the import of it, I still am puzzled. Why are we not on the screen? So if somebody could work on that, that would be good. There we are, great. So the major change in the computer front is making each of the, let's say 5 or 10 million transistors in this thing use about 1/100th the power they do today. This is physics. This is done. It's not yet in these devices. It takes 2 or 3 years to make a change like this ripple through, but that suddenly means we don't have to worry about power. As Ann talked about, the impact of information technology, that's knowledge per person, spreading knowledge. Economic development is based on energy per person. If I'm alone, I'm a 1 human power person. I'm not even a horsepower. Every person here has thousands of horsepower, tens of thousands of people power at your fingertips. That's what's making these lights go on. That's what makes the escalator work. That's what makes all of New York function. Enormous amounts of power per person. How much power is there per person in Africa? Not so much. So the big changes will come about when we're able to alter how much power there is per person. How do we do that? Here's a little article, a month ago or so, from MIT Technology Review, and I'll read it because it's a little small. Maybe I'll make it bigger. It says, microbes for off-the-grid electricity. What's that mean? It means microbial fuel cells. Fuel cell just takes methane, takes hydrogen, turns it into electrons and water. Bugs can create the fuel. Bugs. That's why methane goes into the atmosphere. So if you can generate 1 watt per square meter, and you can make the power demand of something like this go to 1/10 of a watt, we have a marriage of electrons and knowledge. That's what's coming. And there are some very interesting changes. Right now, at this moment in the United States, fight is going on in the Senate about $800 billion of stimulus. In that is about $8 billion to fix the electrical grid. It's, how would we say it, primitive, awful, junky, bad. The American power grid contrasted with the new grid in China, the new grid, there's one in Indonesia that's going in, the grids in Sweden, the grids in Denmark, where they actually hit 40% of power for Denmark coming from wind, because they have a nice electrical grid that can feed from the propellers to the people. These ways of jump-starting the electrical power per person numbers are just taking a hold. And in the United States, tied down with terrible old coal plants, in China, terrible old coal plants. Last year, more new energy generation came from wind than from anything else. So there's a change going on. How do we bring that directly to the places where at the moment there aren't any electrons? Let me show you something. I can find it here. This is something that we should use just to keep our hearts up, so those that can see this. You're all familiar, I hope, with Dr. Hans Rosling's way of showing how the world is. So just to give a very brief explanation, on the bottom axis, money per person, rich. Going to the right, you get richer. On the vertical axis, it could be child mortality, life expectancy. It's life expectancy. So these little dots, each is a country. This is UN, UNICEF, World Bank data, UNDP data. We'll start back in 1800, and in 1800, people were at about, let's pick the middle here, say $400 GDP per person. and a life expectancy of 30 years. So here we are, $400. Dollar a day, 30-year lifespan, 1,800. If you go along the 1810, 14, 1820, you'll notice some countries are getting longer lifespans. Perhaps that's introduction of forceps in childbirth, introduction of wash your hands. We see public health changes bring an increase in lifespan, not for those countries. And you'll see the blue are Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But in the 1950s, 60s, huge changes. 70s, 80s, watch this movement. You'll see AIDS hit in life expectancy. 2007, we have a world in which the country club countries, these OECD countries, there's the US up there, way up here is Japan, over here is Hong Kong. Look at the change. If we watch the pathway for each of these 190 countries, you would see zigs and zags depending on water policy, energy policy. None of that had the benefit of what Anne's describing, this knowledge revolution, where a kid in a remote village in Botswana can see an image of a windmill, and I can make that, generate power, and suddenly the kid is on the net by knowledge. Books will change their form, knowledge will change their form, and we will see Africa here still down. Sierra Leone is still down at 40-year life expectancy. We're going to see movement here as knowledge about changing practices alter people's lives. Now, what's really hard? Electrons and cell phones, internet, has a common technical base. There's power here. I can do something with it. I can go anywhere in the world, find the power, and do something with it. Agriculture is different. The reason the Green Revolution had such an impact in China and Asia is because there was uniform practice of agriculture. Therefore, introduction of strains of rice could have an immediate impact over a large number of people, not in Africa. One farmer will have 10 crops. There's 17 different fundamental, you can take the savanna growth, the forest growth, the grain growth, the root. If you're a cassava country, you're quite different than a country that's doing something involving fruit. So all of the various forms of agriculture in Africa and the variegation of the map of Africa showing different agricultural and soil characteristics means we don't have an easy answer. The only pathway to change lies in dissemination of knowledge. And when Anne mentioned that you use these cell phones now at UNICEF and throughout the UN community to acquire public health data, let's add to it soil and water data. By seeing, we can change things. So there are some brand new technologies that will allow us to change how we understand, and by doing that, alter how other people understand. So I'm going to show you one last thing, and then I'm going to sit down. There are some technologies at base, as I've moved from a computer guy into physics, chemistry, and material science, all those things I sort of skipped over when I was in school. Those are the foundations of what I'd assert, and many would assert, certainly all those that pay a lot of attention to this, as the most amazing technological and business transformation of the century, the move to renewable energy, driven by this awareness of the impact of climate change on the lives, particularly of those in the poorest countries who are at the margin. The drought in Kenya at this moment is killing people. There are people that died last night in the camps northwest of Nairobi. No water. Then the cattle die. Well, if you don't have cattle, you get an AK-47 and go over and take the Turquoise cattle or the Pokot's cattle. So the incidence of small arms combined with drought causes violence. We must make a change. So there are a few beginning pathways to providing power to people. What are they? Sun is a good one. take mirrors, focus them on a pipe, fill it with water, and it makes steam, and the steam generates power. Dig a hole, go to the Rift Valley, the world's best place, sink something down, get the heat, turn it into electricity. These things are solar voltaic, making electrons with light. The cells that now, Kenya, of course, has the world's largest amount of solar power per person, but not more or less in aerial terms, very inefficient, cheap solar cells, not very much power coming out of them. There's a way to make the efficiency of these cells multiply by a factor of 5 to 8. Right now it works. It doesn't work in large areas yet, but it will. So I'm very optimistic about our thrust toward bringing the combination of electrons and knowledge to change the practice of everyday life throughout all of the world's poorest areas. And at the moment, our first step in all this is to use what we've got, these devices, to acquire data, understand data, act on data, change people's minds with data, be in the mode to broaden the audience, to understand how the world is from this room with a few hundred people to those tens of millions of people who would act if they knew how. So that's our charge, and that's our challenge. You'll see technologies here today that are making a change. Speaking as someone that's now in this world of venture capital, where the idea is that you take something that makes a 2-time change, not enough. 5-time change, boring. 10-time change, beginning to get interesting. 20-time change now, that's what we'll focus on. And we really won't focus on anything less impactful. We just don't have time. Certainly in the climate change, we do not have time for a simple 2x change. So I'll tell you 3 quick stories about changes, and you can understand from these what might alter in the way you actually change people's lives. First story, guy at Berkeley, Jay Kiesling, world's most brilliant bioengineering guy. Insert 9 genes in E. coli. What's E. coli? A microbe, a bug. There's one now. Insert 9 genes in that bug, and it makes artemisinin, which kills the malaria parasite. If you can make beer, you can make bio. Get a vat, put the bugs in, and out comes artemisinin. That's a big deal. Dose rate today, 250 for artemisinin from the Chinese yew tree. Dose rate when the bugs make it, as you would make homebrew beer, 10 cents. That's a big deal. So alteration of the characteristics of seeds to resist drought. I know there are all sorts of problems here, but when you see people dying by not having any food because there's no water, altering the seed base that allows drought-resistant crops to feed people does seem like an important step to take. Second story. 2 years ago, 3 now, a researcher at UC San Francisco and now at Kyoto University found a way to take a skin cell, there's a skin cell, insert 3 genes and turn that skin cell to a stem cell. They'll say idempotent stem cell. That means you get my cell, put in 3 genes, it reverts to a form that can then be differentiated into a heart muscle, my heart muscle, into a nerve cell, into all the hundreds of species of cells in my body. This reverted skin cell can be bubbling along in a little incubator and turn into human cells specific with my DNA in them. Why is this interesting? Because today, if you're attempting to find a drug specific for dengue or malaria or for any infectious disease, how do you test the drug? On mice. Mice cells, not ethically. You don't take humans and carve them up. With this technology, you have fundamentally altered therapeutic drug intervention. Most people, when you have a drug, there are a few people have no effect, some people have some effect, a few people have a big effect, some people have a really big effect. Now I could test it against your specific gene set, your specific heart muscle. That makes the specificity of drug application immensely more powerful. That's a Nobel laureate, Shinya Yamanaka. Watch him, University of Kyoto. And then the things that at the bottom are making most changes that no one fully understands. I thought we all understood about materials, plastics and steel and how strong it is. The world of catalysts. How do you make a plant cell absorbing a photon and making sugar? There's a catalytic reaction. It's not very hot. Something in there is doing good chemistry. I have just, in materials science, there are catalysts being discovered every day that have a 10 to 50 time impact on chemical reactions that generate energy or clean water or do a variety of things that we need. So those areas are absolutely the newest areas, fundamentally changing things. And then they're just simple things. It's the last example I'll show you. This, I'll come down a little bit. These are a bunch of garages. Technical University of Munich. They figured out a way in Munich to take garbage. Think Cabera. Take garbage and put it in these garages. The door opens, the garbage goes in, the door closes. It's irradiated with bacteria and it munges on it and it composts. It's anaerobic digesters that turn out wonderful compost, and not a molecule of methane escapes. It all turns into electrical power. It took them 15 years to make what looks like a simple thing. It's not simple. To keep the temperatures exactly right and to measure everything and to put it all on the internet and run it remotely and to have this entire thing function without losing a molecule of methane into the sky is an enormous engineering feat. These people now have 1,000 cities wanting this. You could plunk this thing down in any city in the world, and you tell the city council of Nairobi, this makes you money and gets the smell gone. It converts all the garbage right there. Well, do what Munich does, and do it another 100 Europeans. Berlin, everyone's moving to this kind of very highly engineered technology using bacteria to make electricity. So these technical changes, I think, to repeat what Ann said, we're at a moment where knowledge, information, combining with human desire to use all tools available to change the world is absolutely, we're at a transformational point, and you are the transformers. Thank you very much.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you so much for being with us. We now have about 15 minutes of time where you can ask questions, comments, ideas, but to contribute to this excellent opening presentation and keynote address. So I open the floor. I assume there's people with microphones here, back here, over here. And I can't, the lights are so bright I don't see you very well, so I'm going to ask you to stand, comments.
Wave your arms.
Back here.
Hi, John. Robert Levin. How are you?
Hello.
Nice to see you again. I'm going to the World Mobile Congress, which is the largest conference of mobile entrepreneurs on the planet. And they're now giving awards for applications that provide social benefits. So that's a major mega trend in the emerging markets for cell phones. And I really appreciate your comments about the role of cell phones in economic development. So my question is, what kind of hybrid business models would you recommend for entrepreneurs to adopt in public-private partnerships with foundations or with governments to enable governments, just as you pointed out in the example of bacteria generating electricity, what kind of public-private partnerships or new hybrid business models would you recommend for entrepreneurs in the mobile industry or other vendors of clean technology or other technologies to adopt as we see that incentives have to be built into a new form of capitalism that incentivizes new behaviors and new flows of information to enlighten people about the technologies that are available for adoption?
Well, that's a great question. We're watching the Americans at this moment reinvent capitalism. It's fascinating to see when a crisis truly rivets people's attention, how creative they become. In the arguments going on today and tomorrow, and for the next 4 or 5 days in Washington, it's become clear to a lot of people that if you're really facing a significant depression, absolute economic devastation for many people, look at the unemployment figures, there's a sudden change in awareness. And at the very top of the list, efficiency and saving. We're watching a lifestyle change. Can't continue in the United States the way it has. It just can't continue. You have to begin to see in a different way. An example, if you look, well, I fought my way through traffic in New York this morning. If you look at the incredible wastefulness of the way we've designed cities, buildings, water distribution systems, everything we built was thrown up in a hurry, and it's immensely wasteful. Just paying attention. Anyone in Africa is seeing the waste, just what's thrown away. Who are these people? So I think there's a change that comes. So that's where the ability to see that change, that's where the data acquisition capabilities, I mean, it's important for everyone to realize this little thing's a radio, and it speaks to the towers all around us every quarter second or so. It says, I'm John, I'm here. And 6 of them talk about me behind my back because they know how loud the signal is from this to them. And the one that gets me the loudest says, I've got him, you all leave him alone. If someone wants to call him, I'm the antenna that's going to talk to him. And if I move 50 feet, the other one gets a little louder, and it's, no, I'm in charge now. So behind us, all of us, every person in this room with a cell phone on, it knows where you are. So knowing where something is and combining that with this location has this particular kid with a fever, or this amount of water being used, or the tree that's absorbing far more water than it should, cut off the water supply. The micro-location and micro-identity combined together are the most powerful tools for efficiency. And you can say in these public-private partnerships, public, you would like very much, Minister of Health, to effectively, efficiently know where you best deploy those people to respond to an epidemic, to an outbreak, and if you have the knowledge, you're efficient. So I think that's the crux. I would look at every existing institution to see where you could bring these new tools of efficiency and understanding to bear to save money. There's another undercurrent of it. Police states love this information. So there's a side to this where everyone knows where you are all the time and you never erase it. As I say to my wife, yes, I did go to Marin. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. So all your little life trips are mapped in a database someplace. And that can be a tool to be used in many ways. We have to be aware that this power of information does bring with it sometimes too much information. But if you're looking for those areas where you can really make a difference, I think thinking about ways where knowledge, if we just map the water use of UNICEF around the world, you'd see things you didn't realize. No one really knows how much water they use. The moment you see it, you change your behavior. So we're in the behavior changing business, and in that dimension, we'll use any tool we can to make it clearer to people what their impact is. That's the debate about carbon pricing. The moment you see how much carbon you emit, and there's a price on it, you change your behavior. And those are the tools we're trying to devise.
Other questions, comments? Here, over here, right here.
Tammy Holtman from allafrica.com. Coming to a conference like this is an exciting but limited slice of people doing many wonderful things. You've presented a number of examples here. How do you see, or where do you see, emerging mechanisms for everybody, everywhere, being able to access who's doing what where to avoid costly duplication to share examples for replication. You've talked about knowledge sharing, but how do we get to how we all access aggregating and disseminating that information?
You've solved this in the UN, haven't you, Anne?
Oh, right. Actually, one of the things that we have been challenged with as an organization, and I think as a development community overall, is how to best build knowledge sharing, use of knowledge, and really cataloging it in ways. It's not just about where technologies are. It's what generally works in development, what doesn't work in development. And we haven't been good as a development community in cataloging that. Now, there have been a number of initiatives around the world today that are looking at how to really share knowledge, to consolidate knowledge. The problem is how do you keep it updated? How do you keep it most current? How do you peer review it? How do you really understand what the knowledge is and how it's contributing and what is really working? And because knowledge is changing so quickly, that becomes difficult. But I do think that it's a good idea to really consider whether or not we can create a database where different tools, like some of the ones we've both talked about today, can link in and say, this is what we're doing. I just returned from Davos, and I must say I met more people working in more areas of technology, from things like I talked about with the Ushahidi, with another similar organization that was in Ghana, to many, many kinds of applications that are now being utilized. And we do need ways to help share with the world how those things are working and how they might be scaled up.
I think this is a critical question. When you think about the odd things that have happened just in the last, say, 10 years, 15 years, take two skinny grad students at Stanford who figured out, trivially, you can take a page, look at what the words are, and say, you know, that page is sort of about this. It says dengue. Oh, it's probably some healthy sort of thing, or unhealthy sort of thing. And this one talks about piping. It's probably, maybe it's a nuclear plant person or an oil person, something. It's civil engineering. And all they did was work up a trivial algorithm, simple algorithm, to make pages summarize their meaning. Weird words, some simple way. That's Google. So now they're each worth 10 or 15 billion bucks each, because we've found it so useful to be able to find things we're interested in that we'll go wander around looking, and they're putting every book they can possibly put up before they get sued, as they get sued. So we're going to have the dream that a kid anywhere will have the access to knowledge. So you can say, what's always broken my heart in meeting people that work with UNICEF or UNDP or Oxfam or anyone on the ground, they know so much. And I'll talk to someone and they'll tell me something and I say, why don't you tell those people? Why don't they know what you know? There's no time. It's so hard. If we can diminish the barriers to people putting things up, and you're seeing the beginnings of it with the Twitter-ish stuff and people blogging and people writing about things, as you learn something, remember, wherever you are, what you've learned could be of immense value to somebody or somewhere around the world. If you don't write it down, or if you don't talk about it and stick it up on the web someplace, then you're just going to do what I always do, promise to do it later and never get around to it. So there's a kind of discipline here. When you see something that you really think is fundamentally, write it down then and there and just put it up. I'll guarantee you the search engines are going to find it. We used to have to build this stuff by hand. No more. If it's visible, something's going to find it and weave it together. The weaving tools, admittedly, are elementary now, but they're getting a lot better. So I just want to be able to see what your experience was in Lake Kivu with something that you generated, got the methane out of the bottom and suddenly made electricity. And, oh, if I had only known that, then I could have done something somewhere else. It's all going to weave together, I think.
Back here.
Thanks. I'm Chris Stein from the World Health Organization. But most of the examples you gave of innovation were examples coming from the rich world, and yet many of them were directed at the poor world. So in some sense, the rich world has control over what's going on in the poor world. I'd like to hear a few of your thoughts about how to stimulate more innovation in the poor world, where capital investment is relatively limited. And if you have particular examples of successes, I'd like to hear them.
That's a great question. My first take on that would be Shinya Yamanaka's lab at Nagoya University. One person, 2 grad students, they're people too, all linked, and they did in 3 months this fundamental discovery in idempotent stem cells. Capital equipment, let's say it's an incubator and a sequence, $50,000. You could replicate that lab, and Yamanaka will tell you he can take any graduate student. I mean, someone should know something about biology and chemistry a little bit, and they can, in 3 months, learn this technique and do it anywhere in the world. So WHO or any of the NEPAD, anything that's putting little labs in place, could start something like this up anywhere. My rule, if you can do beer, you can do bio. Any place that somebody can make a bottle of beer can be part of the biological revolution. I mean, things are happening now that kids can alter. I've been in labs where 14-year-olds were putting fluorescent dye into bugs, and they suddenly turned green and purple. Just, you know, there's a lot of discussion about how dangerous this is. But on the side of getting on with it so that people can have food to eat and clean the water they drink, this is an area that has such immense implications. And very often the capital cost for it is nothing. To build that, the garbage garage, you have, once you've gotten the design done, replicating them is not hard. So we have to take the advances in knowledge where we find them. And in Africa's case, in agriculture, and I would assert in health as well, the more distributed labs linked together where researchers share insights derived from local experience, the better off the rest of the world is. There's no place for monoculture science. It has to be deriving from situations that are very, just as in my examples about the forms of agriculture in Africa, everything's different. And so only locally derived problems, local problems, can yield new insights that might have a vast impact. So yes, maybe the examples were from places that had done this work. Some things you're not going to do without capital expenditure. You're not going to make a 3rd-generation photovoltaic cell without spending a couple of $100,000 on vacuum deposition equipment and stuff. So that's not something that's within the range of many countries. It's not far out of range, but it's not something people are. But the idea about how to do it is you can understand that in not much time. And perhaps you'll find a new way to do biologically what today we're doing with physics.
Over here.
Thank you. I'm Juan Carlos Diaz, Pan American Health Organization. I have a question about how was the experience about convincing the users to use the phone beyond communicating by voice? How do you convince the users to give the data, and how do they get some feedback about that the data they sent were used for one action?
Well, if you look at Wikipedia and see the languages of Wikipedia, I don't know how many of you do this, but go look at the page that tells you how many Wikipedias there are. So there are about 200, 300 Wikipedias, ranked by language pages. So English is up there with a couple of million pages. And I think German's bringing up next with maybe 1 million pages. If you go down, the first African language you hit's number, I think it was 76. Kiswahili shows up. And they're only 6,000 or 8,000 pages. I could do 6,000 or 8,000 pages tomorrow in Tanzania and Kenya in Swahili by just having somebody write a page about a bug they know or a soccer star or something, and amplify the amount of language-specific knowledge and culture-specific knowledge, admittedly in a written form, Well, today we've got written. This thing, this new Kindle thing that was being announced by, reads the book to you in whatever language the book is written. Now we're beginning to come to the deep secret of why cell phones are so popular. I don't have to type. I don't have to be literate. I can talk. So the moment the world becomes more civilized, keyboards are not civilized, the moment the world becomes more civilized and you can talk to it, then these issues about data acquisition, how do you persuade people to do it? Oh, they won't, it's too complicated. That stuff goes away. I use, as does the New York Times columnist on technology, I use a speech-to-text program. I can talk, and the thing types. Oh, what a change. So suddenly, you can all send an email that's long, you can get it in the bar at night and say, Ann, I've got to tell you this, and it'll all type it for you, and then before you have to think about it again, you can send it to her, and then she'll have it. So I think there are some
And I'll
more.
get even less sleep than I already do.
No sleep, you're doomed. But I think to answer your question, it's very hard today with clunky, ugly technology to get anybody to use it. It's like telling kids to use educational software. The kids see right through you. It's boring. I'm not going to do it. If it's a game, oh my. So it may sound a little silly, but gaming, how do you get to kids? Music and games. So if it's not music and games, don't do it, because it's not going to get people interested. Music, games, and flirting.
One of the, we work with an organization in West Africa called TOSTAN, which is a community-based approach to many behavior changes. But one of the things that they have noticed is in the last couple of years how many cell phones had come into the communities. And so they have now begun a program. All these women mostly are illiterate. And so we're now working with this organization to look at how do we text for literacy, teaching reading and writing through texting so that people can communicate. Because actually, unlike the US, it's much cheaper to text than talk in many parts of Africa. So there's lots of new uses and new opportunities for these kinds of things.
That's true. I think of the codes people used to do, 2 rings followed by 3 rings means, I didn't have to pay anything.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question back here because we're running a little bit over.
Yes, thank you. I'm Jörg Staudmann. I work for UNDP, and we are working currently on a project called waterwiki.net. This is a wiki that tries to, sorry for my voice, I'm just still recording. It's a wiki that tries to do exactly that, bring the UN agencies together and the UN agencies' knowledge about water together, to make it accessible, and in a wiki format also to open it up to some extent for editing and for feedback. Now, what we discover often is not that it's technology that is the limit. It's not complicated to do it. You can come over these barriers. What is complicated, it seems, it's a cultural issue. People with knowledge are not always ready to share it because knowledge still is perceived as power. Now, my question, do you see a change in this behavior? Is possibly the new technology helping to change that behavior? Is there something on the horizon to see that this is going to change? Because that's a fundamental issue.
I'll take a shot at that. One of the problems with most new technologies, all those in power keep track because they're worried, and anything that they see that's emerging, they will make use of to maintain power. That's the fundamental rule. Always keep track so that nobody can sneak up behind you, and people that have power have money to do that, and people that don't have power or money find it very hard. But the revolutionary change comes, and all this is free. And there's a way to get access to it, and bubbles of knowledge pop up without asking permission. So that's the hope, So in the wiki project, I think I was in a cafe a day ago, and someone there was doing a little class about how to pour concrete. And I was just sitting at the next table. I learned more listening to this guy just answer questions. Don't do this. Oh, that'll break. Oh, no, don't. It's just normal human transmission of knowledge. We in the rich world don't. In the old days, when a kid actually knew what their parent did, now what happens? Goodbye. This is why you have daughters at work, because the daughters have no clue. What do you do all day? Well, I go to meetings. That's my life. I answer email. It's hard to explain why they pay you to do this, but no, so for a kid to get a sense of what is their possible life like, it's not as if they're an apprenticeship at the knee of someone that's, building a plow or farming. We become dissociated in being able to convey what it is that we do. So I think some of these, I hesitate to use this phrase, social networks, but what you find is that people bond together around music or an interest or a picture, and as these tools become cheap, and this thing has a camera in it, all this flicker imagery, you put a picture up of someone in UNDP that did something with a pump somewhere, and put that picture up and let them talk about the picture rather than typing at a wiki page, and people will begin to see it. Look at the YouTube explosion. So I would give every person working for UNDP or for UNICEF a little cheap camera, and boy, are they getting cheap. And wherever you go, you just take some pictures and you stick it up someplace and you talk about what it was. Today I saw someone that actually made the pump work here and cleaned the water up there, and then I saw a place where we drilled a well, and so much better than the other well, but nobody's using it, and they told us it's because their grandfather did the well they use, and they won't ever use something. So you get the story behind it rather than imposing a view of why people behave the way they do. That lets this texture of human understanding begin to build. And so I think you're doing exactly the right thing, and we have to expand it into all these other forms.
There's some participants that are not here, but on the web. Could we possibly take a question from them before we close?
Sure. We have participants on the web asking questions, so we will take one question from the web. Is someone back here have a question from the web?
Shane from Johannesburg is asking about knowledge sharing tools, and especially in the development world, sharing information. How can we guarantee quality of information and data in this kind of system? And related, Yosef Abate from Ethiopia asked what can be done to not only supply these gadgets and tools, but consistently fill them with knowledge.
Well, Johannesburg, here's my first answer. 2010 is what one would call a big year, because every kid in Africa is going to be looking at a television screen and seeing their heroes. So do you have a chance to reach into people's minds? I think so. Now, this is a moment. Sports. I said music, but sports. So you take anything that happens during World Cup and wrap around it a way to have those people watching get some new understanding of the world they're in. Quality control is a problem. You can say stupid things or you can say politically, but nonetheless, there are moments in people's lives when they're open to hearing something new, and this will be one of them. And the partnerships between UNICEF and the vast capitalist conspiracy called FIFA that will extract every nickel possible. But nonetheless,
FIFA is a partner of UNICEF.
they should be, yes,
And
right.
you may have seen the Barcelona Football Club T-shirts that say UNICEF across.
This is good. Just remember what the Holland people had to do in the last World Cup when they wore the wrong pants. Do you all remember that? So I think there are ways that you can use these tools of speaking to people and start conversations in a way, a broadcast way, that then are followed up one-to-one. I think at the end, since this is a web conference, the point of the web are the individual point-to-point communications. So a woman whose 2-year-old has a high fever would love to talk to another mother whose 2-year-old has a high fever. there's a bonding of common interest across all cultures that can now occur because we're beginning to allow one person to talk to. So all of us now have a job. We have 280 million people in Africa with cell phones. We have to call them all. We have to make a link. And out of those links will come bondings and common interests. I often say in Silicon Valley or in California to people, can you name anybody in Kenya? One person? Can you name one person? If you can't, aren't you missing out on something? So if we can find a way that one person can be linked to one person, it will then grow. And remember, you can do this on a scale never possible before. So this is a major change.
I think that also, though, on the question of quality of information, it's a challenge because knowledge changes, information changes, your discovery changes, and how do you continually, take things off as sort of the authority on certain issues and put the new things on? We're looking now at how do we put knowledge onto the web. We're looking first at putting it on the intranet for use and looking at by the people in UNICEF, but then having it peer reviewed before it goes up on the internet. But again, how do you continually update information? It's a challenge. And so I think not only is it a challenge to those who maintain things that are on your web pages, but it's also a challenge for those who are getting information off the internet, off technology tools, to question that information and verify it and have conversations about it, because you can't trust everything that goes up, and you have to have some way of validating and bringing around knowledge and communities of interest around what is really the best available information on a certain issue at a certain point in time.
It's true. At the base, all of us do the same thing. We turn to somebody we trust in an area we know nothing about. So everybody here, there's somebody you turn to and you're asking about water. There's somebody whose opinion you respect. And if you look inside the mailing lists, you'll find there are people who, when they post, or the wiki pages, when some particular person that's a true expert posts, everybody reads that because it's something important. That's the kind of shared knowledge we have to elucidate. Who are our treasures that really know something about something to whom we turn? We all have anecdotal knowledge. Maybe there's a way to capture this throughout the organization so that you have just those opinion leaders or truth tellers that you always rely on, and then you honor them, hoping that doesn't corrupt them, and build so that there are new ones coming along that have knowledge.
Well, I think we're now about 20 minutes into our coffee break. So I'm going to stop this, but thank you, John Gage, so much for being with us, for sharing your wonderful knowledge. So I will extend the coffee break by 5 minutes and ask everyone to try to be back here by 10:25. The coffee is upstairs, one floor, in what we call the Danny Kaye Center. So help yourself and join us, please.